Welcome to another TerranScapes video. I've tried to improve the lighting a little bit in this area. I've got about 1,000 watts on me from a bunch of angles, so hopefully everything's going to look brightly lit, and hopefully be able to see everything clearly. Today's video is a review of a project that I'm working on for a customer. Do a quick check-in with him, make sure that the things are progressing in a way that is going to work for him, and I've got a couple questions about some modifications that might be maybe needed. So anyway, this is a check-in and gives you a chance also to see how I'm working with some Imperial Sector pieces here, and some changes that you might be able to make if you're building one yourself, or ideas about the kinds of work that I can do. Before I discuss this though, as many of you know, if you've been to the site, I did say that I'm not taking any custom projects. And originally at the beginning of this year, well before this year, I was considering building Imperial Sectors as a custom project, and then I thought that I would open up the site to do finishing of terrain pieces for other people, which doesn't require any major planning, in the sense that I don't have to develop new molds, or I'm not carving unique pieces, or I'm not building from scratch complex structures out of balsa wood, that sort of idea. And I was actually going to put up on the site a formal page, hey, I want to finish terrain for other companies, ArmorCast, GW, whatever. And I didn't get around to that, partly because I've been so busy. So, having said that, let's take a look at this project and see where we're at on this one. Basically, the customer wanted to have 4 buildings built using the Imperial Sector from GW. And when I was talking to him about that project, I was saying that sometimes the Imperial Sector, you can stretch it to make 4 buildings, but it's a little bit thin. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do with the buildings, and sometimes you just run out of sprues, is to really provide 2 corners for the building so that you actually get this sense that there's a complete structure, rather than just one half of the building and then a pile of rubble on the other side. When you add rubble to the sides, it's you have to build it pretty high to be realistic. If you've ever seen pictures of World War II buildings that have been totally demolished, the rubble piles on those are enormous. It's a little bit impractical to build them to scale because you run out of actual space to put your miniatures down on, and it really becomes unplayable. So I told him that I thought maybe adding in one more box set to that would give a few more building panels to be able to add some corners to some of the buildings and really add a little bit of height to them as well. What I've done here, to show you the first building out of the 4 that I've done, this is based on a 12-inch by 12-inch hardboard base, and then I built 2 corners, and this corner here is a full 3 stories tall with a top panel on the top here. So there's actually 1, 2, 3, 4 levels that models could stand on, although the 4th level is of course only a couple inches square. And also this highlights one of the things that I've been doing on the sets, which is adding in a styrene panel, and then I can glue on a couple of the pieces from the sprues and then kind of dress them up so that they sort of fit within the motif of it. But by adding in a couple plastic hard sheets, you can add just a few extra panels and expand the overall size of the building just a little bit more. This building features a balcony in the front, which adds a little bit of variety. I've cut out the doors, and I've glued the doors in. Or better if I do it this way. So I've glued one of the doors open, so it kind of creates a little bit of a barrier cover, visually this way. I glued this one back flat against the side, so that way, just they're there, but it's open to the balcony, allows some easy access. And I'll show you on another building in a second, but I did some alternative flooring on one of the buildings so that I could preserve these actual, the floor sections that come with the Imperial Sector, because it's easy to run out of these as well. So by adding an alternative floor in one of the buildings, I've had a few of these extra left over so that I could do a modified floor where I thought, maybe this would be a piece that had collapsed from the upper floors and had been caught on the floorings of the below levels, and this will make a nice little, whoops, well of course when it's glued in, this will make a nice little walkway for miniatures to climb from one tier to the other, and again provide a little bit more of a 3-dimensional aspect to the play of the buildings. So that's the first building there. Oh, I didn't mention, I don't think, but I recommended the customer add an extra box of sprues. So we added an extra box of the Basilica sprues. These are some of the buildings. These are the Basilica sprues here, I believe. Basilica, Administratum, Manufactorum. So anyway, here's the second building. Now this building I built up quite a bit higher, so the third story is much larger on this, and the third story carries around to the other side, and I put a little tiny balcony here. I didn't cut out this door because, you know, this, how playable is this? You know, if you want to stick a model through the door, I believe in the old City Fight rules, it was always said that Space Marines just shot through the walls with their bolters, so any wall was passable. In any case, I wanted to provide a visual block up here as well, so if models were hiding behind this, they could take a, you know, they could get cover on the upper story rather than have windows all the way across, or an open doorway in this case. And what I did here, let's see if I can tip this and show you, is I thought rather than go for a perfectly square building, I'd go for a staggered building, so that one side is staggered just a little bit than the other. And then I've created walkways that would connect across that on the second floor, so that once this is you know, glued down, then again you've got this second tier where models can cross on the second floor, go back to back, take fire from both directions without having to descend onto the bottom left tier and move around that way. Again, because of those extra sprues, you get that really nice tall building, both sides of the building represented. Then what I'm going to do, I'll explain it at the end. I got some ideas about the rubble that are going to go in some of these open areas. That's building 2. Building 3 is the manufacturing sprues. And for some reason, the Imperial Sector has a bit fewer of these than in the other categories of buildings. So this is pretty much what the manufacturer builds. I built a corner here. I did add in another styrene panel, added in a few dressing pieces here to give it just an extra build. And then there were a few panels left over. And I thought rather than make a corner of the building here, I'd make a 4-walled section here. Perhaps this was housing a generator or was some sort of access to a lower level. So it's got a small walkway, small, you know, floor panel on the top, which is damaged. And then I've added another sprue on this side, another styrene panel, plastic card, and dressed that up. And so this way, it kind of gives a, you know, just a little cubicle of obstruction to kind of add a little bit more of a play variety. And I think for shipping, I'm going to keep this smokestack. The smokestack has several pieces for the manufacturer, and I think I'm going to keep this separate, and then that way, when it gets delivered, this can be reassembled at that time rather than have this really, well, look at that, it's right off the screen here. Let's see, there we go, turn it sideways. This really, really long piece sticking up, which I think adds a little bit of fragility to it. It'd be easier to pack it with something a little bit shorter. So, and again, all of these are based on 12 by 12 spots. So just to give you a little sense of what that covers here, if I can hold all this. There we go. So that gives you a little sense here. You've got that corner front, and you got a little obstruction in the back there. Building 3. And building 4 is a shorter building than the first two, but fleshed out quite a bit more. So it's got a nice, you know, sort of almost 3 walls, one fairly complete wall in addition to the front, and a, you know, much more reduced wall on the side here. And again, with the buttresses, the flying buttresses really is what these are here on the sides. I've noticed that building it out to this size and adding flying buttresses on both sides, it just fits. It just fits on the. Well, let's see if I can do this again here. I got a lot of parts separate. I haven't glued them down yet. Anyway, it just fits on the 12 by 12, so that's going to work out really well. You may also notice that this has a balcony on the front, and I decided to do something a little different with the balcony. I wanted to extend the balcony out more than one floor panel. And by doing that, I had a problem with how to support it. I wanted to think about, normally, I'll scoot this up a little bit here and angle it. There we go. So normally, the Imperial Sector recommends that you use these little sort of eagle buttresses to support balconies, but it felt like that's going to be a little short for a balcony that's extending out this far. So I decided to take some of those flying buttresses, and I trimmed one, flipped it over, and then used it as a support so it could sweep all the way out to the front and kind of give that balcony a little bit more support, and then use a pair of the buttresses coming down to be able to give that some front-end support. So you get this kind of nice sweeping arch, which I think is kind of nice and gives a much wider passageway coming through here. The The other thing that I thought I would add, let's see if I got them behind here, is add in a couple little statuary pieces, and then they'll sit inside that area and kind of flank the doorway, and then that way the doorway will have, you know, sort of like a little dressed up walkway feel, a little bit more of an important front. This buttress popped off at the moment here. I'm going to re-glue that in a few minutes here. So there's building 4. So what are some of the ideas that I have about finishing this? First, the question is, these are rather large structures, and it would be possible, if desired, to take, say, a structure like this, which is, you know, 2 fairly large pieces, and they could be separated into 2 individual buildings. If they're, you know, if you're looking, this is to the customer. If you're looking to, you know, create more buildings with less fleshed out interiors, that's one option. Personally, I think it gives it a little bit more drama to have the 2 sides, and it's going to look like a building on the table a little bit more. So that was how it was designed, but it'd be fairly easy to separate these pieces. And, you know, I could even put in some I-beam supports here, like this has been shorn up by troops, you know, in the midst of battle trying to create firing platforms from. In fact, I did that on this building here, just to give you an idea of what I'm referencing. When I glued this side on here, turn it a little bit so you can see that, these 3 panels here include a styrene plasticard sheet, and that is a fairly thin connection onto this bottom tier. So, don't mind the floor. So in order to give that a little more reinforced feel and look, I took one of those I-beams, which kind of, it's not really an I-beam, it's more like, I don't know, a beam of iron. Anyway, and I've used it as a cross piece to kind of give that a little bit of support, like somebody might have propped that up so that it could withstand a little more fire while they were defending the building. And that added quite a bit of structural integrity to this wall, so that way it's going to be nice and durable. So separating the buildings is an option. These buildings, of course, this could be taken off and this could be made into a single, you know, on its own base. But again, you know, it really depends on whether you're looking for more table coverage or more realistic buildings. The other thing I thought is that what I ended up with is there's a few extra buttresses, some of these, you know, some of these little tiny trim pieces here. There's quite a few that are sort of left over after you build the buildings. It's kind of hard to use every one of these small pieces, lamp posts and other lights and, you know, a few extra add-ons. So what I thought I would do is on a couple of the buildings, perhaps in one of, let's see if I can tip this again here, perhaps in one of these openings where there's a wide gap, is build the rubble up the way it would represent, Jesus, the way it would represent if you know, the building had collapsed, but also add in some of those pieces as though they had been propped up to create defensive barriers where the building is the weakest. And it should, you know, leaving some access for individual foot models to cross, and of course troops should be able to sort of storm over those. But since these openings were already a little too small for vehicles to enter, which I think is kind of fitting, vehicles shouldn't be inside of buildings, then that way I can use up some of those pieces and it'll really dress up those rubble piles and really give them a little bit more depth, realism, and hopefully a little bit more tactical play as well. So anyway, that's a quick look at the buildings that I've constructed. And again, this is for those of you who are interested in these products for yourselves. This is one Imperial Sector plus one Basilica box set with a few, maybe half a dozen, 7 or so plasticard panels added into it. And, oh, and I forgot to mention, and the addition of some flooring. And so here, just to show you what I've done, so rather than use the actual GW floor pieces for this, what I did is I used plasticard to create a foundation and then added granny grating, got that idea for mini wargaming, used the granny grating on top of that to give it a nice, this is the manufacturing building, and that gives it a nice industrial feel, sort of like factory flooring look, and that's going to paint up really nice as, with some steel color, a little dry brushing with some bulk gun metal. I think is going to really bring that out. And by doing that, I, you know, conserved a huge number of floor pieces so that I could have those cross walkways on the bigger buildings, giving you, you know, some more variability in those. So hopefully you've enjoyed this. Of course, when I get these painted up and finished, of course I'll post a video for that as well, so you'll be able to see them in their completed state. And I hope you've enjoyed this look. I'll probably have another video up sometime in another 7 days or so, whether it's these or another project. I've got some other things I want to show.